So, a federal judge just ordered the U.S. Marshals to enforce compliance against Donald Trump, the sitting president of the United States, after Melania's cooperation agreement surfaced in sealed court filings late last week. We're talking about a sitting president facing active judicial enforcement action while his own wife has reportedly provided testimony that directly contradicts his legal defense. It's honestly hard to believe. We're at this point. This isn't just about one more legal battle in Trump's mountain of court cases. We're talking about a fundamental breakdown between the president and the one person who is supposed to be in his corner no matter what. And trust me, when federal marshals get involved and spousal cooperation becomes part of the evidence record, the walls are closing in fast. Let me fill you in on what's been happening behind closed doors. So Donald Trump, the 47th President of the United States, inaugurated for his second term in January 2025, has been fighting multiple legal battles simultaneously, even while sitting in the Oval Office. Whether it was the classified documents case that carried over from his time out of office, the January 6th related investigations, or the various state-level prosecutions, Trump's legal strategy has consistently been the same: delay, deny, and attack the legitimacy of the proceedings. He's called it a witch hunt, election interference, and political persecution. His legal team has filed motion after motion seeking to push back proceedings, claiming presidential immunity and challenging the jurisdiction of various courts for over a year since returning to power. This approach worked well enough, especially with the added shield of sitting presidential authority, but here's where the rubber meets the road. We're now in February 2026, and one of these cases has finally reached a critical enforcement phase that even presidential power can't easily deflect. According to court documents unsealed on February 6th, 2026, a federal judge in the Southern District of New York has grown increasingly frustrated with what the ruling calls deliberate and systematic non-compliance with court orders, and the judge specifically cited Trump's repeated failures to reproduce documents that were subpoenaed 8 months ago, back in June 2025. His legal team's pattern of filing what the court described as frivolous motions designed solely to obstruct proceedings, and multiple instances where Trump himself made public statements that directly violated gag orders. This mess is unfolding because Trump's legal team and federal prosecutors are at a complete standstill over document production, deposition scheduling, and witness cooperation. And guess who's stuck right in the middle? Yep, Melania Trump, the current First Lady of the United States. She's supposed to be the loyal spouse, standing by her husband through every scandal, every investigation, every public humiliation, all while serving as First Lady for the second time. But here's the kicker. Sealed documents filed under protective order and partially revealed through a legal error in a public docket entry on February 5th suggest that Melania has entered into some form of cooperation agreement with prosecutors. Now, the full details remain under seal, and neither Melania's attorney nor the special counsel's office will confirm the specifics, but the fact that this information leaked at all, combined with the judge's sudden shift to active enforcement, tells us something significant has changed behind the scenes. And before we go any further, let's be real for a second. Spousal cooperation in federal cases is extremely rare, and when the spouse in question is the sitting First Lady of the United States, it's absolutely unprecedented. It means prosecutors have something compelling enough to overcome not just the natural instinct to protect family, but also the enormous political and institutional pressure that comes with compelling testimony from someone living in the White House. Now, back to the matter at hand. Reports from around February 4th, 2026 revealed just how furious Trump was when he learned that Melania had hired her own legal counsel separate from the legal team handling his defense. According to 3 sources who spoke to Politico on February 5th, Trump erupted during a private meeting at the White House residence, calling Melania's decision to retain independent representation disloyal, and even went as far as to say she was being manipulated by prosecutors who want to destroy our family and this presidency. Talk about strong words. Essentially, the sitting president was calling his own wife the First Lady, a traitor for taking legal advice that wasn't filtered through his control, and this wasn't a private conversation that stayed private within 48 hours. Details of Trump's reaction had leaked to multiple news outlets, making it clear that the president's inner circle is fracturing badly right inside the White House itself. This sent shockwaves through Trump's remaining loyal advisors because it raised all sorts of questions. If Melania, the woman who has stood silently beside him through every scandal for nearly 2 decades, who served as First Lady twice, could prioritize her own legal interests over blind loyalty. So what did that mean for everyone else scrambling to maintain their positions in Trump's orbit? Now, this isn't the first time we've seen this pattern. Trump's loyalty really only extends to himself. Whenever someone stops being useful or does something he doesn't like, he's quick to turn on them. We've spotted this pattern time and time again. Just think about how he turned on Jeff Sessions right after Sessions recused himself from the Russia investigation in 2017. Sessions had been one of Trump's earliest and most vocal supporters during the 2016 campaign, a sitting U.S. senator who put his credibility on the line to back Trump when many Republicans were still skeptical. But the moment Sessions followed legal ethics guidelines and stepped aside from the Russia probe, Trump began a public campaign of humiliation that lasted months. He called Sessions weak, questioned his intelligence, and eventually forced him out as Attorney General in November 2018. Then there was Bill Barr. Trump wasn't pleased when Barr stated in December 2020 that the Justice Department had found no evidence of widespread election fraud that would change the outcome of the presidential election. Barr had been one of Trump's most loyal defenders, an attorney general who had intervened in cases involving Trump associates and consistently interpreted executive power in the broadest possible terms. But when Barr refused to use the Justice Department to overturn an election, Trump turned on him immediately, calling him a disappointment and pushing him to resign before the term ended. And let's not forget how he distanced himself from Mike Pence when Pence refused to block the certification of electoral votes on January 6, 2021. For 4 years, Pence had been the model of unwavering loyalty, defending Trump's most indefensible statements and never publicly contradicting the president. But when Pence concluded he had no constitutional authority to reject state-certified electoral votes, Trump didn't just criticize him. He stood by while a mob chanted "Hang Mike Pence" and waited hours before telling them to go home. Even Kevin McCarthy faced a similar fate when McCarthy eventually certified the 2020 election results and briefly criticized Trump's role in the January 6th attack, though McCarthy later traveled to Mar-a-Lago to make amends. Trump never fully trusted him again and gave tacit approval when McCarthy was ousted as Speaker in October 2023. Now it looks like Melania, the First Lady of the United States, is in the hot seat. This pattern is becoming all too familiar. You can show all the loyalty in the world and defend Trump every single day. But the moment you step out of line or cease to be useful, he'll toss you aside without a second thought. The lesson here is that Trump's definition of loyalty only flows one direction, toward him, never from him. So what did Melania do to tick off Trump? Well, it all boils down to self-preservation versus blind loyalty. The impasse happened because prosecutors wanted Melania to sit for a deposition regarding financial documents that bear her signature, while Trump's legal team was trying to claim both spousal privilege and executive privilege, arguing that compelling the sitting First Lady to testify against her husband, the sitting president, would violate separation of powers. Ultimately, the judge ruled in late January 2026 that neither spousal privilege nor executive privilege applies to potential financial crimes where both spouses may have been joint participants, and that executive privilege cannot be used to shield personal financial dealings unrelated to official presidential duties. That ruling left Melania in an impossible position. As the president's wife, Melania has signature authority on numerous financial accounts, business entities, and property holdings that predate his return to the White House. Some of these are at the center of the current federal investigation. Her name appears on documents that prosecutors consider critical evidence. Her approach seemed to be just hire independent counsel, assess her own legal exposure, and make decisions based on protecting herself and potentially her son Barron, rather than automatically aligning with Trump's legal strategy. At first, Trump seemed to be on board with this idea, or at least he didn't object publicly. He appreciates the appearance of family unity and the notion of everyone standing strong together against what he calls political persecution of a sitting president. But as the legal pressure intensified through January 2026 and prosecutors made clear they would seek Melania's testimony with or without cooperation, some issues started cropping up. Trump's legal team realized they couldn't control what Melania might say under oath, couldn't guarantee she would take the Fifth Amendment on every question, and couldn't prevent her independent attorney from advising her to cooperate if that served her interests best. While Trump's lawyers were insisting on blanket defiance of all subpoenas and maximum obstruction, claiming the entire process was an unconstitutional attack on the sitting presidency. Melania's legal situation required a different calculation. Reports from CBS News on February 7th indicate that prosecutors made clear to Melania's attorney that if she obstructed or provided false testimony, she could face independent charges regardless of her status as First Lady. But if she cooperated truthfully, she likely wouldn't be charged at all. This was the moment Trump began to sweat. You see, Trump values control, loyalty, and overall the ability to dictate the narrative from the White House. He doesn't want to be tied to a legal strategy that is undermined by his own wife, the First Lady, providing testimony that contradicts his defense. And that's definitely not the victory he seeks. And then Melania went ahead and made a move that, according to Trump, was a serious misstep. Melania started looking for ways to protect her own interests and figured she should meet with prosecutors for a proffer session in late January. She even considered providing limited testimony in exchange for immunity from prosecution. Her attorney signaled to prosecutors that Melania would be willing to answer questions about financial documents, business transactions, and her knowledge of various dealings as long as she received assurances she wouldn't be charged. But then when Trump caught wind of all this through back channels, he absolutely lost it. In Trump's eyes, cooperating with prosecutors who are investigating him while he's serving as president is the ultimate sign of weakness and disloyalty. Meeting with federal investigators, that's pure betrayal from the First Lady. Any family member who dares to prioritize their own legal interests over the president's defense strategy is instantly labeled a traitor. Now, this left Melania in a tight spot. On one side, she really needs to avoid federal prosecution and protect her ability to remain free and present for her son, and the financial and reputational costs of being indicted alongside a sitting president would be devastating and historically unprecedented. And on the flip side, she's living in the White House with someone who demands absolute loyalty and views any form of cooperation with investigators as the ultimate betrayal, which means maintaining her marriage and her position as First Lady likely requires sacrificing her own legal interests. The tricky part is protecting herself legally requires some level of cooperation with prosecutors and honest testimony about documents that bear her signature. So Melania is caught in a bind. She can either maintain absolute loyalty to Trump, which means refusing to cooperate with any investigation, taking the fifth on every question, and sharing legal strategy completely with Trump's team. And that only makes her own legal exposure worse and potentially results in her being charged alongside the sitting president, or she can do what any rational person would do when facing potential federal prosecution, which means hire independent counsel, assess her genuine legal risks, and cooperate to the extent necessary to avoid charges. But that'll definitely make the president turn against her publicly and potentially create the most extraordinary personal crisis ever seen inside the White House. It's a tough situation, and that and some mess Trump creates for everyone around him. He demands complete loyalty and wants them to go down with the ship without question. But then he points fingers when things go south. He's not shy about tossing them under the bus whenever it suits him. This whole scenario is causing major stress within Trump's White House legal team and family circle. If Trump has turned on Melania, the First Lady, and is willing to view his own wife's act of self-preservation as betrayal, every advisor, cabinet member, attorney, and family member is left wondering if they're the next target. Those moderate advisors who are trying to balance legal realities with Trump's demands are now worried sick about being the next one to get tossed aside or blamed when legal strategies fail. Meanwhile, the hardliners in Trump's orbit believe anyone who even considers cooperation isn't loyal enough and that compromise or pragmatism is weakness. Things became even more intense when Donald Trump Jr., one of Trump's most vocally loyal defenders, reportedly had a heated argument with Melania during a family gathering at the White House in late January 2026. According to sources who spoke to CNN on February 3rd, Don Jr. accused Melania of abandoning the family when we need unity most and criticized her for hiring independent legal counsel instead of trusting the team handling his father's defense. When someone as publicly aligned with Trump as Don Jr. starts turning against the First Lady, the paranoia and blame inside the White House are reaching crisis levels. The Trump inner circle is fracturing between those who believe total defiance is the only strategy and those who recognize that individual legal exposure requires individual legal decisions. Here's where it gets interesting. The judge didn't hold back with the ruling. On February 6, 2026, Judge Sarah Whitmore of the Southern District of New York issued a 7-page opinion that was a devastating blow for Trump's legal team. The judge declared that the president's continued non-compliance with court orders was willful, systematic, and contemptuous of this court's authority, and added that neither the office of the presidency nor claims of executive privilege shield a sitting president from compliance with lawful judicial orders pertaining to personal financial conduct predating and unrelated to official duties. That's legal speak for saying you've got no solid ground to stand on here. Being president doesn't put you above the law. You're just abusing the legal process and your office to delay accountability. The ruling went further, stating, the court has extended every reasonable accommodation to defendants' counsel, including accommodations specifically tailored to respect the demands of the presidential office. We have granted continuances, accepted late filings, and tolerated procedural deficiencies that would not be permitted in any other case. However, the defendant's pattern of obstruction has now exceeded the bounds of zealous advocacy and entered the realm of constitutionally indefensible bad faith. Accordingly, the court hereby orders the United States Marshals Service to ensure compliance with all outstanding subpoenas and document production orders. Defendant shall produce all responsive documents within 14 days or face civil contempt sanctions, including daily fines. A federal judge calling out a sitting president by name, using the phrase constitutionally indefensible, and ordering martial enforcement created a real stir. It's a significant move, reminding the president of the United States that he isn't above the rule of law. This doesn't usually happen to sitting presidents in functioning democracies, which tells you how extraordinary Trump's obstruction has been. Legal experts are noting that we haven't seen a federal judge take enforcement action against a sitting president's personal legal matters like this since the Watergate era. Andrew McCarthy, a former federal prosecutor and conservative legal commentator who has defended Trump on numerous occasions, went on Fox News on February 7th and made a statement that really should catch everyone's attention. He said that when you have a federal judge, particularly one who has bent over backwards to accommodate not just defense requests, but the unique demands of the presidency, finally saying enough is enough and bringing in the marshals, that tells you the behavior has been egregious. Beyond what any court can tolerate, this is not a close call. The phrase constitutionally indefensible from a federal bench is about as strong as judicial language gets. Just think about that for a moment. A conservative legal voice on Fox News is essentially saying the judge's action was justified against a sitting Republican president, and this is coming from someone who has consistently argued for broad executive authority. Jonathan Turley, constitutional law professor at George Washington University and another frequent Trump defender, mentioned on MSNBC on February 8th that the court's ruling is meticulously reasoned and will be very difficult to overturn on appeal. The judge anticipated every executive privilege argument and addressed them systematically. The legal team's options are narrowing rapidly. When legal experts from both sides start using terms like constitutionally, indefensible, and options narrowing, that's the moment to really pay attention. So let's break down what this showdown could mean, because it's not just a captivating legal story. It has serious consequences for how our government operates and whether judicial authority can function when the president refuses to cooperate. First up is the immediate political fallout. Trump is already facing significant backlash from moderate Republicans who are nervous about the 2026 midterms, and his ability to claim he's being persecuted becomes harder when conservative legal aid chiefs. Experts are validating judicial actions against him. His messaging has relied heavily on portraying himself as a victim of political prosecution. But when Andrew McCarthy on Fox News is saying the judge had no choice, that narrative weakens considerably. Republican representatives in competitive districts are getting anxious about November, which is definitely adding to the tension. Being tied to a sitting president who's facing martial enforcement creates vulnerability that no amount of campaign spending can overcome. And the revelation that the First Lady has apparently sought independent legal counsel and may be cooperating with prosecutors adds a deeply personal element that's impossible to spin. Democrats are definitely planning to take advantage of this situation, and they'll argue that the president believes he's above the law and does not hold the Constitution in high regard, and they'll have federal court rulings, including that devastating phrase, constitutionally indefensible, backing up those claims. You can expect to see quotes from Judge Whitmore's ruling popping up in Democratic campaign ads, speeches, and debates throughout the 2026 midterm season. Now, let's touch on what this means for the judiciary itself and the office of the presidency. Chief Justice John Roberts has been working hard to keep the federal courts out of direct political battles with the executive branch, wanting the judiciary to be viewed as above partisan influence. But when a sitting president openly defies court orders to the point where marshals must be deployed, the judiciary is forced into a confrontation it never wanted. Trump and his supporters are now poised to attack Judge Whitmore, implying bias and calling this judicial overreach against a democratically elected president, which complicates things for the judiciary's image as a neutral institution. Yet, Judge Whitmore probably felt she had no other choice. If she stayed silent while a sitting president continued to ignore court orders with impunity, the judiciary's credibility would take an even bigger hit. The court's authority depends on the principle that its orders will be enforced against anyone. If the President of the United States can simply refuse to comply without consequences, it doesn't just undermine one case. It undermines the entire constitutional framework of checks and balances. This situation shines a massive spotlight on the most fundamental question in American democracy. Is anyone, including the sitting president, subject to the rule of law? At the heart of the issue is whether Trump can just ignore court orders, obstruct proceedings, and use the power of the presidency as a shield against personal legal accountability whenever he feels like it. If he gets his way on that, it could totally change how the relationship between the presidency and the judiciary operates. For generations. For 250 years in American democracy, we've operated under the principle that the president is not a king. The office has enormous power, but that power has limits, and the courts exist to enforce those limits. Presidents comply with court orders not because it's convenient, but because the constitutional system requires it. Nixon handed over the tapes, Clinton sat for a deposition. The system worked because presidents, however reluctantly, acknowledged judicial authority, but Trump has always been uncomfortable with those limitations. He craves total control and sees judicial oversight as an obstacle rather than a constitutional safeguard. If deliberate non-compliance by a sitting president is allowed to succeed, that's a devastating blow to the separation of powers, and it opens the door for future presidents of either party to use the office as an impenetrable shield against any legal accountability whatsoever. Each time Trump brushes aside court orders, ignores judicial authority, or attacks the legitimacy of legal proceedings from the most powerful office in the world, it weakens our system of checks and balances. It starts making behavior that used to be completely unacceptable feel normal. Think about it. If a sitting president can simply refuse to produce subpoenaed documents until marshals are sent, what's to stop the next president from doing the same? These actions don't just disappear when Trump leaves office. They become precedents, normalized behaviors that erode institutional authority. And that's pretty dangerous. Democracy relies on those norms and institutions. And when those norms crumble, democracy itself starts to falter. Looking ahead to the 2026 midterms, it's clear that all of this is going to have some significant effects. We're just months out from those elections, and the narrative being set now is bound to influence how things go. If the story playing out is one of a sitting president battling every court, ignoring every order, facing martial enforcement, while his own wife, the First Lady, seeks legal distance from him, that spells real trouble for Republicans running in competitive races. Voters usually don't reward chaos and dysfunction. They want stability and competence. Right now, this White House isn't offering either. So expect Democrats to champion a message focused on restoring respect for rule of law, constitutional integrity, and basic governmental competence. That message might just hit home for a lot of voters, including some moderate Republicans who are exhausted by the constant constitutional crises coming out of this administration. So here's the deal. A federal judge just ordered U.S. Marshals to enforce compliance against the sitting president of the United States, calling his obstruction constitutionally indefensible, while sealed documents suggest the First Lady herself has entered some form of cooperation agreement with prosecutors. This isn't just another legal skirmish. It's a constitutional crisis unfolding in real time. If Trump succeeds in defying the courts from the Oval Office without real consequences, then we're basically saying judicial authority doesn't matter when the defendant is powerful enough. And that would mean we're stepping into completely new territory where the presidency becomes an office above the law rather than an office bound by it. It's about so much more than just Trump-specific legal troubles. It's about whether we genuinely have a constitutional system where checks and balances function, or if we've entered an era where a sitting president can simply refuse to comply and dare anyone to stop him. So keep an eye on this. Things are just heating up. The next few weeks are going to be crucial as the 14-day document production deadline approaches and we learn more about Melania's cooperation and what it means for the president's legal defense. The stakes have never been higher. The judicial authority more directly challenged from inside the White House itself, and the outcome more unpredictable. This ride is far from over.